So welcome, a very warm welcome to everyone this afternoon for our 12 o'clock session of design thinking for business leaders with a real focus on navigating ambiguity. You've probably heard the term design thinking before in different flavors, but today we're really going to focus on design thinking in a very practical and a business context. As you would have seen from the invites, we've curated from what we're seeing is some of the most practical and relevant material from the Stanford D.School. The D.School is the business faculty of Stanford Uni. So today's going to be hopefully pretty interactive. We're going to try to avoid the death by PowerPoint, and we're going to hopefully get you experiencing something via a few different ways and activities. So I hope you've all got one or two sheets of your blank paper there for us to go through. So looking forward to that. If we move on just to a bit of housekeeping, you'll see the chat function on the side there. You'll see Nikki, who's helping us out with the chat. So if you can have your microphone on mute just for the moment, if possible. We will be breaking out into a couple of breakout rooms as we go through, which you can unmute, but just for the moment on mute would be awesome. And gallery view, thumbnail view on the right, so you can see who's speaking. That'll give you the best experience. So again, thank you everyone for joining. Just before we go through the facilitators, we wanted to get your quick bit of feedback. We'd be really interested on what perhaps caught your eye from when you got the invitation. Was there anything in particular on the invites that really stood out, or is there anything that you're wanting to learn a bit more in terms of the headline we put out there? So perhaps if you just put one or two or a couple of words in the chat function would be awesome. So we're going to hopefully keep this interactive as we go through, and we'll build them into it. Thank you, Nikki. Why are you here today? So you probably, there you go, Stelvio, kicked off the chat. So as everyone's putting that through, we might just flick to the next slide, Shane. Stelvio, there we go. Ambiguity. That's going to be a central part of today, and we're hopefully going to get you actually experiencing just a little bit of ambiguity, uncertainty. We're finding that's one of the best ways to learn is through direct experience. Joan, thank you. Interested in the title, the treatment of ambiguity, so a similar kind of flavour. Martin, I found ambiguity a term not often fully understood in business. That's very true. I guess in our lives at the moment, there's so many unknowns and ambiguity that it's kind of hard to get our head around sometimes. Natalia, it's nice to hear new ideas, more specifically, and how they can be successfully applied. Hopefully you'll get a few new ideas. So thank you very much. We'll keep an eye on that chat as we go through. So just a quick intro to everyone that's on the call today. So we've got Ross, Nikki, and Shane and myself. Give us a wave. And we've also got a live sketch artist, Debbie, on the line. So we're fortunate enough to have Debbie. Debbie's actually going to be live sketching some of the conversations we're having. So both what you're putting down on chat and also the topics we're going to go through. And we'll flick to the mural, the live sketch mural at the end, which is pretty cool. You'll be able to see some of the themes coming through. So the facilitators today, Ross, Nikki, Shane and myself, we come from different backgrounds across a couple of advisories, Foundstone and Nilo. And Nilo have a particular focus around client experience, employee experience, from a behavioural psychology approach, which is pretty interesting. And then Foundstone, we do a lot of work around design thinking applied to business strategy. So hopefully we'll get you thinking about some new perspectives today. The D.School approach is going to be pretty central to what we're going to go through. The D.School, you might have heard of them, or you might have heard of IDEO. The same founder, a guy called David Kelly, was the founder of both those organisations. And what we're finding, they're bringing a pretty practical approach to looking at design thinking. So we're going to be blending in, you'll see some videos from their actual live students and teachers, and we're going to be blending some of our real life experience. So we wanted to start with a few facts. Now, we're conscious that you know, there's always bits of research that can kind of swing to certain directions, but this bit of research really caught our eye. McKinsey did a 5-year study of 300 publicly listed organisations across the US and Europe, and it was really the essence of it was there was a lot of boards and directors who were they'd heard about design thinking, they'd seen it in use within their business, but they weren't really sure about how it was affecting the top and the bottom line. So they did a study over 5 years, and as you can see by the numbers here, some pretty impressive numbers: 32% revenue growth, 56% shareholder return. So we'll send you this report afterwards. It's quite a practical read. So from what we're seeing locally here in Australia is we don't have these specific figures for our own organisations, but the organisations and the business leaders we're working with at the moment, a lot of them, once they've started the mindset approach of design thinking, which we're going to be going through today, a lot of them are telling us firsthand that they could simply not go back to the way they were doing things. So we're going to be talking through some of those examples today. So I think that's a testament locally to what we're seeing. So what you're hopefully going to be learning today. So the D-School approach things through 3 different perspectives: mindsets, abilities, and methods. And today we're really going to be zoning in on this mindset piece. And when the D-School refer to mindsets, and when we look at mindsets, we're really hoping today that we're going to have you actually experiencing something. You're going to perhaps see some of your attitudes towards some of these learning pieces, and we want you to start to become aware and to start to notice how you're reacting to these situations. We find that, and the D-School are finding that by doing some of these activities, some of them are pretty basic, you could say pretty rudimentary. We're going to get you drawing and a bit of sketching, but the intention behind this is really to actually have you doing something behind the essence of design thinking, so that you can hopefully take these away with you. Why you'll learn today, hopefully. This is a definition that the D-School put out there, and we thought it was pretty practical of navigating this ambiguity piece. So it's the ability to recognise and persist in the discomfort of not knowing. So a lot of the business leaders we work with today, some have used design thinking, some haven't. But what we're seeing that some business leaders, probably the norm, is that people perhaps shy away from throwing themselves and immersing themselves into ambiguity. Perhaps some of those reasons could be with fear of the unknowns, or we perhaps we want to have all the answers, or perhaps we think it's just going to take too much time. But what we are seeing, and design thinking principles at the essence, is when we really concentrate on spending time and getting comfortable with those mindsets, it can really change the whole game. Now, I know, Ross, you're seeing a fair bit in the organisations and leaders you're working with, and you've got a different kind of a bigger picture conversation around navigating ambiguity, I believe.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Great to see everybody here. Thank you for joining us. It's amazing to see so many different perspectives and experience from different industries and different countries as well. So thank you very much. I'm going to expand a little bit on the 2 key components of today's session, namely navigating ambiguity firstly, but also this idea of design thinking, and specifically honing in on what we mean by design thinking mindset that Andrew introduced just now. So first of all, just to kind of give us a perspective on this, we're going to dive in and have a look at how D-School themselves define ambiguity, and we'll build from there.
Yeah. Go now. Yeah. I think ambiguity is like the ocean because it surrounds us. You know, if you're on an island, you're going to have to figure out how to navigate the sea. And it's the same thing. We're surrounded by ambiguity. If we want to do anything, we have to figure out how to navigate it.
So the first time I started thinking about why ambiguity is such a critical element of how we teach at the D-School, I was reading an article called The Pop of the Wild, which is about this idea that in every learning experience, there's the student and a teacher, and then the world that they're investigating together. And those things form a triangle. But when you take the world out of it and you're just teaching something that the teacher knows and expecting the student to absorb it, you've basically created this binary between the student and the teacher, and you're leaving out all of the richness that can happen with the full triangle. That really made me start to think about how at the D-School we want the world to come in. We want students to be fully experiencing the world in all of its complexity, in all of its frustrating complexity, and not limiting the interaction just to student and teacher. This is what brings the ambiguity into what our students face in our classrooms. And it's really challenging. It puts the teacher in a position where they are not the sole expert. They actually don't know what the right answers are. They don't know what the students are going to design, what kind of solutions they might come up with. And it puts the students in an unusual position of having a lot more agency and also facing the kind of uncertainty that comes into your life when you start to embrace ambiguity as a part of your creative work.
We work with a lot of students who are amazing at fulfilling the requirements they're presented with. So a trick is to give them multiple requirements where they have to kind of figure out which ones are the right ones. The students have to get used to doing that on their own, because a lot of times in life, you're going to be presented with situations where you have to figure out what's important rather than be given sort of the rules or the goals. We'll give them help, but we won't necessarily give them a roadmap. We'll give them things to do, but not targets to hit, so that they have to figure out what the targets are. I think the successful students are able to create their own constraints and create constraints that are very meaningful to the problem at hand. The ultimate goal is for the students to just get excited about jumping into ambiguity versus being afraid to try or avoiding it completely.
All right, so a really interesting perspective there from D-School themselves in terms of how they approach ambiguity, but how they use it as part of the learning for the students that are going through their design thinking program. Just wanted to briefly expand on the idea of ambiguity to take into account all the things that we face in business. Here we've got an acronym or a term that many of you maybe would have heard before. And a couple of the components of this were actually mentioned in the video. So just to elaborate on ambiguity, we're going to, as a frame for today, include also volatility, uncertainty, complexity, as well as ambiguity, and use that as the, as the frame for, yes, navigating ambiguity, but also taking into account that these other components are also at play when we're talking about the business landscape and defining strategy in a world of rapid change that we're facing at the moment. So how do we think design thinking might be a way of navigating that environment? Just to kick off this idea of design thinking mindset, I'd first like to pose a question, which is, what does design thinking mean to you? So if you could open up the chat box again, and just in a minute or two, just jot down, what does design thinking mean to you? What sort of thing does it bring to mind? Rapid testing of ideas, Natalia, love it. Okay, so just getting ideas out, testing them, Thinking in systems, Mark, would you mind elaborating a little bit there? It's an interesting one. Collective intelligence, test and learn. Great, Lulu, thank you. Experience, learning from that experience rather than looking for a perfect answer before we move forward. A methodology to understand the user and develop strategies. Solving problems, great. I think that's an interesting one, Jota. The idea that we're actually solving something tangible, a problem. Part of the challenge is getting to the problem first, and then using design thinking for something real. Involving a range of people, great. Getting to test ideas and get feedback. Solutions that one time might have been deemed impossible. I think, Alan, there's been a lot of that this year, realizing that what we thought was impossible actually maybe wasn't. Peter, thank you. Great. Hopefully we can give you some ideas there. Iterating and learning, John. Fantastic. Martin, fantastic. So addressing the types and attributes of people we need to get the results from or test with. Iterative, dynamics of moving and interconnected parts. Great, Mark. I think you're recognizing that it's not just about a person or people, but all those people exist in part of a system and collection of systems. Understanding the differences between the parts is vital. Fantastic, lots of really good suggestions there. Thank you, everybody. We'll wrap that for now and move on. But I think what we'll do is we can pull some of these suggestions together and share after the session, because I think there's some really interesting stuff in there. So I'd like to very quickly get everybody experiencing some elements of what we think a design thinking mindset is all about. I'm going to get you, hopefully you'll see Shane in just a moment here on the top right of your screen waving. I'd like you to grab a pen and paper, and your task is going to be to draw a portrait of Shane. But there is a catch. You're not allowed to look at your pen and paper throughout the whole task. I'd like you just to stare straight at Shane the whole time and draw a portrait of him without ever looking down at the paper and the pen itself. You'll have 2 minutes to do this. And even at the point you feel you've finished your portrait, I'd like you to use that full 2 minutes and keep staring at Shane, and not till the very end look down when we give you the cue. So 2 minutes starting from now. All right, few seconds to finish off there. We'll give 10 seconds. Last frantic scribbles. The volatility of time pressure. Here we go, 5 seconds left. And we'll wrap it there. So now, hopefully you haven't looked down the whole time. You can now look down at your masterpiece. And what we've created there, for those of you that haven't tried that before, is called a blind contour portrait. And they often look something like this. So I'm sure no matter what your expectation was at the start, that all of you have hopefully got something like that. So who persisted through the challenging environment and actually created a blind contour portrait? I'd like you all just to hold up your portraits to your camera. So hold them right up to the camera so we can see. Fantastic. Oh, there's some great ones going on there.
I'm flattered.
Fantastic. Yeah. Shane has never looked so good.
And I'm very, very sorry.
Beautiful work.
Great. And, you know, obviously we're going to completely trust that nobody glanced down, nobody looked down at their screen there. So what I would really love to hear from all of you about that is just what were the prominent thoughts and or emotions that you felt before, during, and after the task? Were there any notable points where your thoughts or emotions changed? Were there any bits that stood out? Just share in the chat box for us now. If you could, just take a minute or two to do that. Amusement, great. Anxiety, yeah. Excitement, thanks Lulu. That's something that the D-School video called out, is that excitement in ambiguity. So that's really good. Ingrid wants to get to the end so we could see what we achieved. Fantastic. Peter, amazing one there. Really difficult without that instant feedback, real-time data and kind of feedback on how you're going. Great. Anticipation. Mariana, continuing even though you didn't know what it was going to look like. Curiosity, awkwardness, Natalia, fantastic. Resisting the temptation to look, great. Unsure, constrained, awkward. Alan, when Shane put the cap on, there was a sense of that's not fair. Great, fantastic. Awesome, some really great ones there. And you know, I think probably with a little bit more time, we could look at how that happened before, during, and after. But I think generally speaking, some really great emotions related to this idea of a design thinking mindset. So if we actually just take a quick look back at those components that we spoke about earlier, some of that discomfort you were feeling was quite possibly around a number of these ideas that we'll also feel in business a lot of the time. So the volatility, the goal changed partway through, felt like it was not fair, felt like the goalpost had been moved and we put all this effort into one thing and now we're going somewhere else. But obviously in business, we have to move forward and complete our portrait or our strategy and adjust. Uncertainty, not being able to see real-time progress or data. Martin, I think that was your point there. Complexity, drawing is quite often a hard task for all of us at the best of times, but made harder by imposed conditions in this particular instance. And ambiguity, may not have done the task in this way before. So that idea of just not being quite sure what the definitive frame of the activity is. So just to wrap up, there's three key elements to design thinking mindset that D-School outline. And I'd just like to wrap up with those, but also tie it back to some really prominent business literature. And I think the connection is really interesting. One of the reasons you were all able to complete your blind contour portrait is the idea that you got used to being comfortable being uncomfortable. So you persisted regardless of being uncomfortable. And as John Maxwell says, if we're growing, we're always going to be outside of our comfort zone. So this isn't just something that we have to endure and persist with. It should be something we seek out. It means that we're growing. It means that we're developing and learning and evolving. And it means that we won't get left behind in a business landscape by our competitors. Make a mess. Elon Musk says here, you know, failure is an option. If things are not failing, you are not innovating enough. So It's this whole idea that we have to make a mess. Yes, we have to sort out the mess at the far end of it. It has to turn into something great. But to get to that greatness, we have to go through this massive mess in the first place in order to get there. And start now. Those of you that said things about anticipation, lack of being sure at the start of the activity, the key is just getting started, getting the pen on the paper and going. As Edward de Bono says, the need to be right all the time is the biggest barrier there is to new ideas. So we just got to get started. We've got to, as all of you said about design thinking, we've got to get started, we've got to test, we've got to iterate, we've got to evolve, but the key is getting going. I'm going to hand over to Shane now, who's going to delve into a little bit more detail around this design thinking mindset and how it pertains to our businesses and our business landscape.
All right. So thank you everyone for such wonderful portraits. It's lovely to be an art piece. What we're going to do now is to think a little bit more and go through a tool that some of you may have actually seen before and may have used in different capacities to map out the life cycle of a customer in particular, or a business problem in particular. But we're going to try and use that and adapt that and really pull out that idea around the mindsets, the design thinking mindsets that we use to sort of unlock business problems. So the first thing I would like you to do is to flip over your piece of paper that you drew my portrait on and draw this. So we need halfway across the page, we'll just draw a line and we'll put March, June, September. And then on the vertical, we'll have positive and negative. So it can be as rough as you like. Alrighty. Whilst you're finishing off drawing that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my year. So my year started perhaps a little bit below positive because I may have indulged and had a few too many martinis on New Year's Eve, but it quickly started to move positive as we got back to work and we started to really hit our goals for the first half of the year. But then around March, something happened that you may have heard of that really caused the mood to dampen. And it led to a whole heap of really, really rapid changes with the coronavirus really closing down a whole heap of what we were doing as a business and then also individually. However, by the time we got through to around June, things were starting to look up. If you're from Melbourne, as we are, things were starting to open as they were around the country. And there was a real sense of optimism creeping back in that maybe this new normal was going to be a really positive place. It was going to come a little bit more quickly than we may have thought. Unfortunately, a little bit more corona reared its head and we've had to really deal with that. And that was really, I suppose, probably the low point of the year, is feeling that we were really going back in and we were just going to be in this cycle forever. Somewhere just after that, Liverpool won the league for the first time in 30 years. That's not relevant to business, but I just like to mention it as often as I possibly can. But really what has happened over the next few months is just really adjusting to that new normal. There's been some peaks and troughs, but ultimately it has been a pretty tough couple of months as a Melburnian for our state, but also just I think more generally and globally, of course. However, as we head into October, we meet all of you lovely people, and that's definitely going to be a highlight of the year for us. So what I would like you to do is to draw your year. And we're going to give you 2 minutes to do that. We know that years aren't necessarily linear in the sense that all experiences are the same. There are ups and downs. So try and get 5 or 6 things on your page, some positive things, some negative things, and draw the line between them. You might want to write, or you might want to draw a couple of little images, but 2 minutes on that now. And one more minute. 5 or 6 things. And about 10 more seconds, just wrapping up. Alrighty. Oh, that came out abruptly. Whilst you are finishing off your year in the life, what I would like you to do is to have a look at what you've got there in front of you and circle the lowest point on your timeline. So just going across, just put a circle around the lowest one. And based on the discussion of VUCA that we've had thus far, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, have a think about which elements you think might be the main drivers of that low point. It's okay if there's only one main driver, and it's okay if there are multiples. So have a think about what elements of VUCA you think might have been the main driver of that low point. Alrighty. And now what we're going to do is to put you into breakout rooms. Nikki's going to do that automatically. You'll just see a little box prompt come up in the middle of the screen, and it's going to ask you to go into a room. Just click yes on that. And we're going to ask you to do two things, and we'll repeat these instructions in the breakout room, so they'll pop up the top whilst you're working. You'll have about 6 or 7 minutes to do these two tasks. In the first task, we're going to do 1 minute each, and we would like you to ask 3 questions to understand the root cause of your partner's low point. So you'll have to quickly share what the low point is, and then the other person will ask 3 questions around what might be the root cause. So we really want to try and get under what that might be. So for an example, it might be that in the first lockdown, you had to pivot your business to remote working. So that might have been the real low point. But when you get behind that, one of the questions might be, well, were you optimized for remote working? Was that something that as a business you had done previously? No, well, there's a challenge there. And then you can ask another question under that. What were the key challenges in actually doing that, in transitioning into remote work? So on and so forth. So aim to get 3 questions out each. And then the second part of the activity is we want to think about, once we have that root cause, can we reframe the moment as an opportunity? So to take the example that I just gave about transitioning to remote working, that was something that a lot of businesses were sort of thinking about doing anyway. They were toying around with the idea. But this move to actually having to do it has maybe showed some of the opportunities in it and also some of the problems. So there might be a way of reframing what was previously seen as a real low point and as a real problem as an opportunity, as something that you can really shift to a strategic advantage. So those are the 2 tasks, 3 questions each, and then we'll work together to reframe that. And what I'd like you to do is write down what you would reframe the opportunity as. Again, we'll repeat all of these instructions when you're in the breakout room. So Nikki's going to open the breakout rooms now. And you've got 1 minute for the first task each, and then you've got about 2 or 3 minutes each for the second task. So you should see a little prompt come up. Just hit yes on that.
I don't think Pratik's joined meeting room 5 yet. Pratik, if you just click on that join button.
Alan, have you got a breakout room? Oh, you're on mute. Sorry there, Alan.
Sorry.
Yeah.
There we go. That's unmuted now. Good to see you, Shane.
Yeah, good to see you, Alan.
Going well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good fun.
Yeah.
Got to have a dance to some music, so that's always good.
That's right. Yeah, that's good. I think the portrait was very revealing. When you put on the cap and then the glasses, I thought, oh, what is going on here? It was just lovely to feel the emotion, you know, of being totally disoriented.
Mm.
Yeah, very effective.
The music was good for it. There was some really good cues in the music. So there was a point where it was like the music was doing this thing, and I was like, that's a really good point to put on Sonny's.
I didn't hardly hear the music. I was so anxious about getting the glasses on after you raised them. It's interesting that, isn't it? You block out things that don't seem important at the time. Yeah.
I did notice how you really got into the character of the music when you added your cap and Sonny's, Shane.
Yes.
Nice, slow.
Yeah. You got to do it in time, Ross. It's really important.
Oh, Nikki, I think they've still got quite a bit of time left.
Yeah, maybe just a prompt to swap them over. And Ross, can you see Pratik has come up as in the waiting room? But I don't have a cursor, so.
Migrated into BAU system.
Sorry, I had a.
Nope. Here's a poor connection.
So is design thinking something you've evolved towards, Shane, or has it been a focus of most of your working life?
I think it's been, so I come from a teacher education background, sort of from quite a while back.
Yeah.
And so one of the tenets, whether we call it design thinking or not, one of the real core tenets when we do work with teachers is to give them experiences of teaching.
Right.
And experiences of learning the material. So we're constantly working with them on that dual kind of purpose, that they need to experience what it's like to be a learner in a given activity or a given kind of content area, but they also need the opportunity to teach.
Yeah.
And more than that, they also need the opportunity to reflect on being in both positions. And so it makes quite a lot of sense to me, you know, when I first encountered many years ago now in the design thinking work, it made a lot of sense to me that because it speaks to that broader piece around empathy, that your whole goal is to really understand what it is that you're asking people to engage with, and really have a language for talking about that.
Right.
And, you know, in the work that we're doing at NILO, I think it, you know, lines up really nicely that it means that there's much more of an emphasis on co-design rather than that more traditional consulting model of just presenting solutions.
Yeah.
It's much more collaborative. It's much more around really working the problem behind the problem. Yeah. So yeah, it's really positive, and it's been great to get even more stuck into it, I think.
Right.
Oh, we got people coming back.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
Cool. So as people filter back in, give people a minute. Nikki, hopefully people are all sort of coming back in and the rooms are closing up. Cool. Alrighty. So what I would like to do, first of all, we'd love to get a couple of examples. I know we've had you doing some things. We've been doing a lot of the talking. So I'd love if some people could unmute and maybe, would anyone like to share what opportunities did you uncover? So the way that it'd be great to share is what was the problem behind the problem? So don't worry about the broader framing, but what was the problem you uncovered and how did you reframe it? What was the opportunity that you uncovered?
Still got half of them chatting in the breakout rooms.
Sorry, I can't see that.
So we'll just wait until
we'll wait a moment.
A few more people have come back.
Sorry to everyone who's already back. You'll get the same instruction twice.
Not to worry.
They must be having good conversations if they're still going.
Yeah, we certainly could have gone for a bit longer.
Oh, you ruined our lovely chat. Well, what's going on?
We're having a lovely conversation.
Hopefully we'll find ways to have people link up out of this, I think. Keep the conversations going.
I'm still trying to process how it's considered a problem having too many martinis at the end of the year.
It was just that I woke up feeling slightly poorly, Martin. I woke up in a very, very good place. I was very happy, but I can't say that I was above the middle line. You know, I was sort of feeling a little poorly the day after. The martinis weren't the problem. In fact, the martinis were a fantastic opportunity.
It's like the old David Lee Roth quote, I used to have a drug problem. Now I can afford it.
Well, I think we'll leave that one. All righty. So, sorry to the part of the group who have already heard this. So what we'd love to do is just get a couple of groups, so just a representative from a couple of groups very quickly. What opportunities did you uncover? So finding this low point, finding out the problem behind the problem. So what was actually causing that problem or that low point? How did you reframe? What opportunities did you uncover? I'd love to have maybe one or two groups share. And I don't have a capacity to see everyone.
Mark and I were having a conversation about the fact that after all COVID and not traveling as much, a lot of executives are forced into airplanes like their buses, commuting, you know, daily, internationally and domestically. That one of the nicest opportunities has been the fact that you can refocus on your family and you as a person, as opposed to on you as a business asset and a cog in a big wheel. So we talked around it, and that's mental reframing, I guess, from what effectively was a crisis for everyone to a personal opportunity to reconnect better with really people that matter.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic one. Thank you for sharing that. The other one that we've heard was the same point, that many executives not flying around have actually had time to work on their businesses. So rather than constantly having to travel and losing days a month, they're actually able to spend a bit of time getting to stuff that was in that pile of business problems they would like to address. But really, that's a fantastic example of a mindset shift. Yep. Maybe one or two more.
Shane, one of the things I think I uncovered during that exercise was that COVID forced, ultimately I used to say, well, for many years, in any business, nothing happens till somebody buys something. So, you ultimately need to be selling, and selling when you're used to doing that face-to-face, traveling to people is hard. COVID just ended that instantly, and we had a huge dip in our revenue, but I was forced as a result of that to follow people up and chase people virtually. And I found that they were much easier to reach and much easier to get in front of, and it was far more efficient. So you can do, you can get a hold of somebody for a VC call much easier than a face-to-face call, much easier to get in people's diaries. You only need a 30-minute slot. There's no need to travel. And people actually are available when they were really hard to get hold of before. So we've, as a result, we've come out of COVID with a bigger sales revenue result and better growth as a result of that specifically. So
fantastic. Thank you very much, Peter. I think that's actually maybe one of the things that might sustain out of this as well. That, people are maybe much more willing to hear things like pitches and so forth, and, have new business conversations in an online capacity first, because there are so many advantages to just being able to jump from half an hour meeting to half an hour meeting, as much as there are also challenges that come with that. I might move on, not because I don't want to hear all of these, but just because I am conscious of time. And I just would like to connect back to sort of our two key points here. So today we've been talking about mindset and a design thinking mindset, and how that might help us to frame up and understand a VUCA landscape. And a design thinking mindset helps us uncover the root causes of problems and gives us an opportunity to reframe them strategically, or reframe them as strategic opportunities. What we've been doing today is we've played around with a couple of design thinking methods. So the blind contour portrait and the year in the life. I'm sure all of you can imagine how the year in the life activity could be used in a really detailed way. You could plug quite a lot of data into that to create a customer journey map, an employee journey map, all sorts of things. Really what that is just a tool. By using these kinds of design thinking methods and tools, we can better empathize, or we're set up to better empathize with the root cause of customer problems or employee problems or client problems. So we can actually use these same methods and these same sorts of frameworks to do quite a lot of work. They're only really effective though, like any tool, they're only actually effective when we pair them together with the right mindset. So the strategic design thinking mindset helps us actually unlock the power of the tool. One thing that we'd love you to reflect upon and in the chat box, and Ross, I might actually throw back to you to sort of read some of these comments because I don't have access to the chat box. But what is the one thing that has stood out today? We've heard a few already. What is the one thing that stood out from today's session that you will apply or would like to apply in your business? So just reflect and put that answer in the chat box for us.
It's okay. I'll throw over to you, Andrew, to read some of these, and you can wrap up for us.
Sounds good. So your key takeaways, whether it's hopefully you've experienced and learnt something at least. I had the privilege of, I was in a breakout room with Mariana just before, who's dialing in from Mexico, and it was fascinating to hear about what's happening over there and the different ways that they're responding compared to us. Thank you, Ingrid. To do my business no matter where I am. As I understand, you've been globetrotting yourself from the UK around, so I'm sure you've experienced that firsthand and getting pretty used to it and good at it. I think as Mark I think it was Mark and Peter mentioned that Now, there's some businesses in this very unknown and uncertain landscape that actually are thriving. Particularly technology and software organisations we're seeing, but there are other industries that are perhaps doing it really tough, even from a survival point of view. So I think we've seen today, we've got all ends of the spectrum from different parts of the world that we have to navigate. Mark, A Year in the Life tool, a strategy session tomorrow. Fantastic. Sounds like Shane did a good job there. Was nicely done. So thank you. Look forward to that. Now I might just you might see Debbie's image that is pretty much formed in the background. I might just pin Debbie's. Nikki, you able to pin Debbie's live sketch there, so we can have a quick squiz. So Debbie in the background has been live sketching on her iPad, all the themes and some of the comments you've been putting in. So we're going to be ending up with a full-page mural of some of the main topics and the main conversations. So we're going to hand that to you afterwards. I'm just going to pin that myself. That's awesome, Debbie.
Thanks.
You can see reframing opportunities, being comfortable with uncomfortable. I think we had that on the chat, and mindsets at the heart of it. I think you've picked that up beautifully, that at the heart of what we've been trying to do today is get you experiencing something through some pretty basic exercises. And I hope you've been able to just kind of recognize how you've reacted to things and how you've responded, so that you can perhaps take that part of that bit of that mindset into your daily life, whether it be solving a business problem or even into your personal life. Persisting in discomfort, I think that's a cracker, Debbie. I think in design thinking, what we see that often, myself personally and some of the business leaders we speak with, there's probably this default reaction to dive into the solution. But when we actually can persist and become somewhat comfortable in the discomfort, it can really start to bring things alive. Iterative, test and learn, rapid testing, solving problems. And then VUCA, as Ross talked us through, so the volatility, uncertainty, and that bigger concept. I've just seen your note there, Joan. Shame that we couldn't go for longer. Yep, good idea. I think this is going to be an ongoing series, so thank you for your feedback on that. Perhaps a 2-hour session probably would be better fitting, so thank you very much. We'll take that on board, certainly. And Steve, be prepared to listen and learn. Yeah, love it. I think this listening piece it's a simple thing, but it's not often that easy, is it? So I think at the heart of mindsets and what we've done today is really just listening behind what's really happening in uncertainty. So we're nearly at the hour, so thank you very much everyone again for joining us. We've really appreciated your involvement on the chat and the activities. I hope you've got some benefit from it. We'll be sending out the mural and a bit of a follow-up to everyone after this. We'd love your feedback, so hope you've taken away something from it, and we'll look forward to chatting with you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. See ya. Bye.
Thank you, Joan. Cheers.